Hello and welcome to another session of Streaming School. My name is Leon Haley and I'm really pleased to have you back again. I'm filling in for my dear colleague Nisha, who's had a couple of days off, but she'll be back tomorrow to do all the proper intros, outros, and to make sure that all the follow-up items from the sessions are there and happy. I'm really pleased to introduce my very good friend, Mr. Michael Scott again. I nearly said guard, Michael. I nearly said guard. How are you, my friend?
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. Really good.
How's teaching your own children?
Yeah, back into this. I don't know. All the days and the weeks are just merging into. Is it like week 3 now?
I don't even know. No, it's gone week 3. It must have gone to week 3 because
no. I mean week 3 of homeschool because we took the 2 weeks off for the Easter.
Oh right.
And then I'm not sure, is this week 2 or is it? I don't know.
That'll be week 2 then, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike, it's day 1. It's day 1. This is the first.
It's definitely going. I'm not sure where though.
That's one of the things when you teach your own children. You think, I got all this experience, I know what I'm doing, and then you teach your own children, you're like, I know nothing. I know absolutely.
Yeah,
that's all I can do with Gabriel. I've never taught a 4-year-old in my life. You give me anyone that's right, a 4-year-old, Gabriel's like, he does everything. It's done. All right, buddy. It's over to your screen, and it's all with you. What are we looking forward to today?
So I thought it would be quite fitting in terms of the times to look at disease.
Yeah, brilliant.
So, this is one of the key topics. This comes up in topic 3 of your biology. Those of you that are following the AQA syllabus, this will be the 3rd topic that you'll come across. And we kind of start off with these 2 terms of disease being either communicable or non-communicable. And you will be expected to know what these 2 terms actually mean. Now, if a disease is communicable, it means it can be passed on from person to person. In other words, we may refer to a communicable disease as being infectious. So, for example, we have things like HIV is a good example of a communicable disease. The flu is a communicable disease. And chickenpox. Yeah, chickenpox. That's another communicable disease. There you go. And a non-communicable disease are things that can't be passed on. You can't catch a non-communicable disease. These are non-infectious. So, there are things like scurvy. Scurvy is caused by a lack of vitamin C. A lot of sailors used to get this because the fruit used to go off on their excursions. Another example of a non-communicable disease could be cystic fibrosis. So what we're going to focus on in this lesson, all right, and where I really want us to focus is this term here. This is the communicable diseases. And I think it's just fitting in the times that, that we're living in at the moment, that we can actually have an understanding of, what a communicable disease is, how they spread, and, how they cause problems inside the body. So any disease that is classed as communicable. Now remember, communicable just means it's infectious. It means that you can pass it from person to person or from organism to organism. That does include from one species to another. So if a disease is communicable, what's actually being passed on is something called a pathogen. And that's your first kind of key word for this topic. It's the pathogen that's being passed on from person to person. And you do need to know the definition of a pathogen. Now, a pathogen is just a microorganism. It's a microorganism. And that word microorganism, micro meaning small, and organism meaning living thing. So a pathogen is just a small living thing that causes disease. This would typically be, to recall the definition of a pathogen, you are typically looking at 1 mark in your exam. Now, there are 4 types of pathogen that you are expected to know. Okay, the 2 most common are, bacteria, and we have a virus. But we also have fungi and protists. And you should know an example of each. For example, typical bacterial disease could be salmonella. Okay, salmonella is what causes food poisoning through uncooked meats or working in unhygienic workplaces. A viral disease could typically be HIV. HIV is caused by a virus, and obviously what everyone's probably aware of in the news right now, also the coronavirus. So the coronavirus is a pathogen. Fungi can be things like athlete's foot, protists. Protists can cause things like malaria. And again, what I really want to focus on, because the common 2 that you will be asked about in your exam are bacteria and viruses. So let's take a closer look. Let's take a closer look at bacteria first. So bacteria are what we call prokaryotic cells. And if you remember from our first ever biology lesson, we said that prokaryotic cells have no nucleus. They do not, their genetic material is not found within a nucleus. But what bacteria do, which is quite interesting, is that bacteria exist outside of your cells. They never actually penetrate the cell. They always exist outside. But what bacteria do that kind of make us feel ill or make us feel poorly is that these bacteria, they produce toxins. And these toxins are basically poisons. And what they do is they damage the cells and the tissues in our body. And it's those toxins that make us feel, they make us feel lousy, make us feel ill. Now, the virus is a lot more interesting. And if we take a closer look at a virus, and as I'm talking about viruses, just remember that the coronavirus, this COVID-19, this is exactly what's causing the problems with the coronavirus. Because what a virus is able to do is the virus is able to get inside of your cells. So any virus, it actually reproduces inside of your cells, not like the bacteria, because remember, bacteria reproduce and exist outside of the cell. So it's quite easy to destroy bacteria because they're outside your cells. Whereas a virus, they get inside your cells. And once inside, they replicate. And I'm going to underline this word here. They replicate a lot. So, for example, let's say that, you know, here is one of our body cells, okay, and along comes the virus, like this. What the virus is able to do is kind of inject its genetic material inside of our cell. And the virus is quite clever because when inside, it now replicates. So all of this, you know, all of this that's in the news at the moment is actually in your GCSEs. So, you know, the genetic material that's been injected inside the cell, it just starts to replicate. It actually uses the cell to copy itself. And then once that virus has replicated, it then causes this cell, and hopefully you can see this, it causes that cell to burst open. And you should be able to see here, look, that now all of those viruses are now free to go and invade another neighboring cell. And it's this problem right here of, you know, the virus being inside of your cells. It's this that's causing a lot of problems because, you know, for bacteria, we can simply take an antibiotic. Because the bacteria is outside of your cell, we can quite easily destroy those bacterial cells with an antibiotic. But the problem with a virus is because it goes inside the cell, you can't destroy the virus without destroying your cells. And that's the big problem when trying to fight a virus. And on Friday's lesson, we're going to look at, you know, what can we actually do to try and combat or build up this immunity from these viral diseases. So, you know, this is how bacteria and viruses reproduce. They're completely different in how they make us feel ill. And it's at this moment here, you know how in bacteria they produce toxins, and it's, you know, those toxins that make us feel ill. Well, when it's a viral infection, it's when our cells start to burst open because, you know, they're full of these these pathogens. It's that moment when the cell bursts, that's when we start to feel ill. So I want to just quickly go through how these different pathogens are transmitted. How are they passed from person to person? And there are a few ways that these pathogens can be passed. And again, you need to know all of the different ways that pathogens can be passed because you would have to apply this to different scenarios. So the first method of transmission is something called direct contact. Okay, you can be in direct contact with someone who has a communicable disease, and that allows the pathogen to transmit to you. Now, this can be done through two ways. Okay, This can either be through having sex, so it can be sexually passed on, and there are certain pathogens that are, passed on, especially in the fluids of females and males. But this can also be done just by shaking hands. So that's another form of direct contact. If I have, a pathogen on my hand and I shake hands with someone else, the pathogen is then transmitted to that person. And this is direct contact. Another way of transmitting disease is through water. Unfortunately, some countries do not have access to clean water, and they are exposed to unclean water, and it's in these pools of unclean water that bacteria can exist. You may have heard of cholera. Cholera was actually a pandemic back in the 1831. So I'm giving you a bit of a history lesson here now. But cholera is caused by, the consumption of unclean water that contains bacteria. Another method of transmission of disease is through the air. And this perhaps is the one that people are most fearful of when it comes to corona, because when we talk about disease being transmitted through the air, what they actually mean is that if somebody sneezes, then there are droplets in the air. If I sneeze, I'm sure we've all sneezed and seen droplets of moisture leaving our body. Well, within those droplets, there could be a pathogen. And if someone else, unfortunately, breathes those in, then they're going to, be more likely to catch the disease. The fourth way of transmitting disease is by unhygienic food prep. So as I was saying before, this could be your salmonella. And this is basically due to not thoroughly cooking food. So not cooking food thoroughly, or as scientists are now discovering, this could also be due to reheating food. So that pizza that's left over may not be the best thing to reheat sometimes. We can also transmit disease by a vector. Now, a vector just means an organism that spreads the disease. An organism, there we go. An organism that spreads disease. And I'm going to wrap up on time. So, just to give you an example of a vector, okay? A mosquito is a perfect example of a vector. Mosquitoes will carry the protist that causes malaria. And in more recent research, it's believed that badgers are also known as vectors. A lot of farmers have found that their cattle have been infected with tuberculosis or TB, and there's a lot of research going into whether badgers are the vectors for this transmission of tuberculosis. So yeah, guys, you really need to know the difference between a communicable and a non-communicable disease. You should know that communicable diseases are caused by pathogens, you should know the 4 different types of pathogens and at least one example of each pathogen, or one example of disease caused by each pathogen. You specifically need to know how bacteria and viruses make us feel ill, how they reproduce, and how these different pathogens are transmitted from person to person. So yeah, I hope that was understandable. There is a question that I've set for you guys to have a go at. Yeah, have a good day.
Thank you so much, Mike. Really appreciate it. That seemed to pass in like 1 minute.
Yeah, I find these parts of biology I really get stuck into, actually. Although I'm a chemist by trade, this is the interesting side of biology.
Well, that's the part.
And it's relevant for the time that we're living in.
Oh, well, you're teaching this lesson a lot at the moment.
No, it's funny that you see a lot of, I suppose, misinformation put on the internet about viruses and disease, and it's just funny sometimes going through Facebook or YouTube and stuff and just reading a few comments that people don't actually know about disease and how they're transmitted and what the virus is actually doing. So I just think it's an interesting topic because it's very, very relevant to a lot of people right now.
That is one of the things. If Facebook had a filter that was a science check, or WhatsApp had a filter that was a science check, forget even just a fact check. Like the internet would probably just grind to a halt.
Yeah, it would. It would. There's so many people that I want to rant at when I'm looking at their Facebook posts, and I'm just like, nah, keep your mouth closed. Just keep your mouth quiet. Don't say anything.
Keep the peace, Michael. Keep the peace. Keep the peace.
Keep the peace. Yeah, let's just believe it's 5G.
But it's a psychological thing as well. I think people just like to share. Do you know what I mean? Like you can't have news stories in newspapers and stuff, which are half truths, at the best of times, and you can't expect that not to have a knock-on effect when we have a chance to share our own nonsense news. People are going to take it. Do you know what I mean?
I think there's not a problem with that. I also just believe.
No, I think there is a problem with that, Mike. I think there is.
No, there is. I just think when you share misinformation, that's what causes all this. People kind of share this misinformation, and when you share that misinformation with someone else, you can be creating anxiety or some other problems within them. And it's like, well, maybe if you had known the science behind it, you know how to structure your response to it.
Do you reckon that's what what level of kind of learning would someone need to get to? University level before you could debunk a lot of what's coming up forward?
Say that again.
What level would you need to get to? Like level of study would you be able to look at something and be able to debunk it quite quickly in that example that you've just given?
You'd have to get to my level. It takes a long time.
So all we got to do is master science, teach it for 15 years.
Not everyone can reach it.
All right, I'm just going to keep believing my 5G stuff then.
Yeah, it's 5G.
Yeah, my brother's he's really on that at the moment. I'm just like, he's just got to wake up. You just got to leave it. It's got to let it go.
He's on the 5G thing at the moment.
It's shocking how many people are on the 5G thing, but it's also, I think it's just because so many people have so much time.
But this is what I'm saying. If they have had me as a science teacher when I was at school, they would have known that, look, an electromagnetic wave cannot cause a virus. It's just crazy. But each to their own.
It is what it is. Thank you so much as ever, buddy. Thank you so much as ever.
Nice one. Take care.
Nice one. Hold on one sec.